Welcome back to Great Day St. Louis. Spring break is almost here, and if you want to avoid the dreaded, I'm bored, that's what Kent says. His kids always said, I'm bored. From your kids, now is the time to start planning. So we are excited to have Dr. Tim Jordan with us today to share some expert advice. And Dr. Jordan, I like that we're doing this because not only is this advice for maybe families getting out of town, but just as importantly for the families who are staying in town, which I have a feeling are the majority of people.
Yes, I agree.
So let's start talking about the advice to parents and caretakers. How should we prepare for this time off?
On the one hand, I think you can pre-plan things so that when they come to you, like with Kent, and they say I'm bored, you don't have to jump and try and run around and be the entertainment director. So you can ask them, what do you want to do? What would be fun? What are some indoor things? What are some outdoor things? What are some outings that you guys might want to do? So the whole family can brainstorm fun things. And I had a girl in my counseling practice yesterday, and she decided, she's a high schooler, she wants to redecorate her room. So her mom was going to take her to the paint store and buy a couple of different colors of paint and some decorations and things. So that was one of her projects. If you have an arty kit or an arts and crafts kit, you can go to the craft store. You can buy some paint. You can buy some arts and crafts supplies so that you're ready. So that when that moment comes and they say, I'm bored, you can say, why don't you do what you said you were going to do before? And the stuff is already here.
And it sounds like planning goes a long way, because if my kid in a few years comes to me and says, I want to switch up my room today, that's not going to happen. But putting the plan in place with a family meeting on what's important to everyone that we want to do, that could really work for everyone.
It's not just supplies, it may be outings. People do staycations where they say, okay, if a friend came in town, where would we take them? Well, maybe we can just do that with ourselves. But sometimes you need reservations, otherwise you may miss out. So there's some planning things you can do. But on the other hand, we were talking about this a minute ago, I also think it's a spring break. I think we forget the break piece. Our kids are, in my experience, so scheduled and so busy and so stressed and overwhelmed because they're running from this practice to that activity. And so having a week to not have all of that, hopefully, to just kind of breathe and to follow their own interests and daydream and do things they love to do. That's also, I think, a really important part of the vacation.
Don't overschedule.
Yeah.
I like that idea. For the kids, how else would you suggest that even though this is a break, they're not then doing this all day or doing this for 7 days nonstop? How do you work that into it?
Well, I think part of the discussion ahead of time is let's talk about things like bedtime. In the vacation, maybe you can stay up later and wake up later. And maybe you ease up a little bit on the screen time because they're not having to study, there's no homework. But I would set some boundaries around what's okay and what's not. And then I would follow through with whatever everybody decided was reasonable. So they're not spending the whole time in their room with a pad of some kind. I think I would avoid that for sure. The problem with the pad sometimes isn't what they're doing on the iPad or the phone. It's what they're not doing. They're not going outside. They're not reading. They're not drawing. They're not playing guitar. They're not going outside to see if their friends are down the street. So it's oftentimes what's more important is what are you not doing when you're spending so much time with those things.
Fantastic point. As this guy always does, making fantastic points, and he makes so many of them on his podcast. It is called Raising Daughters. Suggest you listen to it. You can also find this segment on firstalertfour.com/greatday following the show. Guys?
Great advice.
Yeah.